Good evening, everybody. This is Marty from Dawgs blog. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. I had to throw that in there. This is tonight's podcast from October 31st. It's Ghouls and Goblins Night. Um, I love October 31st, Halloween. It's a one day a year I can take my mask off. Anyway, um, Tom's report is up. You probably heard the noon report. We finally got done with the expert, the DOJ expert, and moved on to a AAA fraud investigator who said absolutely nothing and wasted everybody's time. All this information was revealed once before on the other AAA fraud investigator that they had up. So there was just a few questions that the DA asked, no questions by the defense. It was about the theft of Baljeet Atwell's pickup truck. Okay, so that was done. The afternoon session, they came in starting at the judge was on the bench at 1:39. The jury was not up yet. If I'm having any problems with a mic, I hope I got it straightened up from last night. I had it on the wrong mic is what I did. I'm a screw up. Let me know if there's any issues, but it should sound okay. So they talked about some 1101 evidence. Okay, what is 1101 evidence? Just as a reminder, most everybody knows what it is by now. That's prior bad acts. They're trying to throw some more shit on the fire as far as Frank CARSON is concerned in regards to his niece, Heather Erickson, and her husband, Leonard Hall, that lived in one of their rental units. And the DA was, they're claiming there was an altercation, and the DA was just reviewing the information. Again, this was not in front of the jury. She's saying that Frank Carson had property stored at that house. It was on I forget the name of the street to tell you the truth, but it was in Modesto. Heather was making the rent payments, and some of Frank Carson's property was damaged by water in the shed, and apparently these were antique books, several hundred of them. Marlis Ferreira said the tenants say the Frank Carson mom, that's Valley Carson, said they could get rid of the books. They did sell the books in town. It was vintage reading or something like that. Frank Carson went to the property and threatened to kill them and make them disappear and all kinds of stuff. They were so in fear for their life, they fled the residence and went out of state to Texas. That's where Leonard Hall's family was. Heather and Leonard had gotten married sometime before that. At some point, and I don't understand the timing on this, I'm not real clear, but Leonard Hall had pled in that case to a grand theft felony charge. He said he didn't do it, but he pled to a felony. But he was released from jail. So at one point he was in custody. He was arrested one day when they took the books to the bookstore. They were coming back. They got stopped by the police and they were arrested. Had some of the books still with them. But he was arrested at some point and went to court on some point, and he pled out to a felony charge on something he said he didn't do. He was released, and he was supposed to show up for drug court. He never did it. Fled to Texas and then was in Tennessee for a while. And now he's back in custody. And this 1101 evidence comes in for state of mind, she's saying, in regards to Frank Carson. She says it is for uncharged crimes or acts by the defendant. she wants to show the bad behavior, and this is basically all her case is character assassination. The judge told her she's got to decide what it is. Is it a uncharged crime, or is it prior bad acts? She's going to have to make up her mind. And they took a lot of time on this. They were reviewing jury instructions because she's going to instruct the jury after he testifies, she said, and the reasonable doubt to uncharged or previous acts. So there's some things that judge was telling her that she's going to have to make up her mind on which way she wants to go with it. Judge Zuniga and Marlissa Ferrer were having one of their little friendly chats, having a discussion on which way to do the instruction. Marlissa Ferrer wants the threats, the 422 PC, which is terroristic threats, but she's not sure, and she's looking at the judge's face. This is what she does, and judge was kind of getting that sour look on her face and says, terrorist threats, question mark. So she decided to just put it in as a prior bad act, showing previous bad behavior and state of mind of only Frank CARSON. Now what they're claiming is that these books that were stored at this house in Modesto is one of his rental properties that his niece and her new husband were living in. He had some antique books that were in the storage shed or something in the carport. They got water damage somehow, some of them. And his niece and Leonard Hall, her husband, had taken these books and still sold them for like $3,000 at a bookstore. Percy Martinez objected. And they said that Frank CARSON had come over and threatened them and kicked their door in the middle of the night, and kicked their locked bedroom door in the middle of the night, and so it scared them so badly they fled the state. They went out the back window, hopped the fence, snuck back around, grabbed their car, took off, disappeared. But they still had books in the car that they were still trying to sell. Percy Martinez, he objected to the instructions at the end of the case. There's no charges of this. What they're claiming was done. And this could enhance the testimony of the witness, could give it more credibility if she makes this jury instruction. And Judge Zuniga says that the instructions are given to protect the defendant as a jury to not misuse the information in the trial. The objection is noted but overruled, and she will give the instruction right after the witness's testimony. So, jury came up. They came up at 2:10. Now, here are the numbers, the jury numbers for today. Jury came up at 2:10, scheduled for 1:30. This morning, the jury was up at 10:08. The jury was out at 11 o'clock. They were in court 52 minutes in the morning session. The afternoon, the jury came up at 2:10, and the jury was ordered out of the courtroom at 2:12. They were in for 2 minutes. They finally got back in the courtroom about 2:45. And then they were out again at 3:19. There's another 34 minutes. And then they came back in at about 10:39, and they were sent home at 4:03. So you have about 24 minutes there. So a grand total of about an hour and 48 minutes that the jury was in the courtroom listening to evidence today. And some of that time that they were supposed to be listening to evidence, they're watching the judge and the attorneys in a sidebar, in some lengthy sidebars. Whatever that's worth to you. Jury was up at 14:10. The AAA representative was back on the stand. Marlissa Ferreira asked him if there was any further contacts with Baljeet Atwal in regards to the truck. He said no. She said no further questions, no answers, no questions by the defense. So they made him wait around from 11 to 1 till 2:10 to answer one question, and then he was sent on his way. The jury was sent out at 2:12 again. So that's the 2 minutes I talked about a minute ago. Percy Martinez and Marlissa Ferreira then went in to chambers with Judge Zuniga to discuss the in custody Leonard Hall situation. They were in there about 8 minutes. Leonard Hall was there in custody. He had been taken into custody. Just sounds like just a couple of weeks ago on the warrant for the failure to appear at drug court. And they were talking about, when they came back out, they were talking about his rap sheet and some of his priors not showing up on his rap sheet. Because he was convicted on this felony 487, which is a grand theft. That's the books. On April 17, 2016, it's a felony charge. But then he was released the next day and he fled the state. The DA, she made a motion to exclude any referrals that he had absconded to another state and was currently in custody. Judge Zuniga says that it looks like he fled the state after the grand theft charge. And the DA doesn't want any mentions of him leaving, but she says it is what it is. That the juries know what's going on. They know when somebody's in custody, and they have a right to know some of this other stuff. So Marlissa Ferreira says Leonard Hall left due to Frank CARSON, not the charges, in fleeing the drug court. He wasn't concerned about the charges or the drug court. He was afraid of Frank CARSON. Well, so is Kurt Bunch, so I guess so. Judge Zuniga said the DA has a theory he left due to Frank CARSON, so he missed his court day. And she says the jury will decide whether he fled due to Frank CARSON or the court date. She says the jury is very good at picking up on these type of things. The judge also noted that, Marlissa Ferreira also noted that Leonard Hall is not sentenced in his sentencing yet. He is scheduled to be sentenced tomorrow. Funny how that works. So he's testifying today, going to be sentenced tomorrow. Marlissa Ferreira claims she doesn't know anything about that, and she's not going to be there for his sentencing or anything else. So Percy Martinez's response was, so there's a possibility that he could be released tomorrow. So it's obvious that Leonard Hall could be looking for a deal as for having a sentencing hearing tomorrow. Sorry, I had to sneeze. Judge Zuniga noted that every witness that's been in custody, the jury knows it. They're drug addicts, they're felons. The jury knows anyway. You're not going to hide it from them. There's no reason to play any games about it. So the state of mind of the witness is also of relevance too, why they're testifying. They were talking about some juvenile charges and a conviction that to be excluded. Excuse me, I I got to sneeze again. And it was an arson when he was 16 years old. He had been convicted of an arson and went through the juvenile court system. Percy Martinez is arguing it should be allowed to be used. Also noted that he had fled to Texas and Tennessee. He was trying to avoid the consequences, and he had set fire to a Frank Carson property. Judge says this is an old 16-year-old case. He's not going to allow it. The arson charges as a juvenile. The witness is in custody in court tomorrow. He'll be allowed to testify tomorrow and not talk about his prior arson. Percy Martinez also noted that in August of 2015, Hall was contacted by Frank Navarro after receiving a complaint at a residence. Apparently, Frank Navarro had gone to their residence on a call of a fight, domestic violence, possible situation. They went there. They found drugs in the house. Heather Hall was on probation, so they did a probation search. And they were both arrested for drug possession for sales, and endangering a child, the 273A section, which is a child endangerment for having dangerous drugs in the house that could be available to the child. Marlissa Ferrer, she said she doesn't know anything about that information. And that information is not in, that incident is not on record. So the judge cut her off and says the theory is out too long. Her theory is getting strung out too long on this. And she says there's no conviction on it anyway, so it can't be used. And she said this defendant probably will not be crossed to go through cross-examination today anyway. So at this time, Leonard Hall was brought in to the witness stand. He was dressed in civilian clothing. The jury was up at 1:45 p.m. and Marlissa Ferreira started her direct. He said that he knew Frank Carson was a relative of Heather Hall, or Heather Erickson at the time, when they married. She was living in the residence at the time when they got married, and he moved in when they got married. They did live together for 5 or 6 months prior to them getting married. He said he paid rent. He was a tow truck driver. Gave his money to the wife to pay the rent. And he said that she paid that rent at Frank Carson's office. He took her there and waited outside. But he had no personal contact with Frank Carson himself until later on. I'm sitting here trying to read my notes. He said he had full use of the house. He was not aware of any Frank Carson property at the house. Later, there were some boxes of books in the shed in the carport that got water damage somehow. He says Leonard Hall said he asked his wife permission to get rid of the books. There's about 12 to 15 boxes, a total of maybe 200 books. he never really saw the type of the books and had to use a shovel on some of them to get them because they were stuck to the cement and stuff. He believed he had permission to get rid of the books, and the carport is not enclosed. He never had contact with anyone in the family in regards to the book during the month. He says that Heather Hall had asked Frank's mother, Valley Carson, if he could do something with the books, and they're claiming that she did, but he did plead out to a felony. He was stopped by law enforcement officers on the last trip with the books. He was arrested for thefts of the books. The wife did say that they had permission to sell, but he did eventually plead to a grand theft on 4/6 of 2012. He was released from custody to report to drug court, and he never did. He went to the bus station and he fled. He said that one night that Frank kicked his door in, and Frank rushed around the house, and his wife, Georgia DiFilippo, was also there, and she was giving threats to him also. He said he's never been scared of threats like that before. That night in the house, they fled out the back. They jumped the back fence, and they snuck around the front and took Heather's car and left some personal property in the house and never came back. They said they went to Rhonda Erickson's house and stayed at Rhonda's for 2 months. Then they were arrested with some of the books and spent 5 months in jail. After they fled the house, they said they went to Rhonda Erickson's house and stayed with her for a while. And then when he got out of jail, he went to Texas to meet up with Heather because she was there with his family. And he was never stayed at Rhonda Erickson's house after he was released. He said Georgia DiFilippo was there, yelling and throwing clothes around the house. Heather's charges were dropped, but his were in effect, and he stayed 6 months at his parents' house. But he didn't stay there any longer due to the fear of the threats of Frank Carson. He could find him at his parents' house, and then they moved to Tennessee. Then they broke up in 2009. Leonard Hall went back to West Texas after they broke up in Tennessee, and he heard the next time he heard from Heather was about 3 weeks after that, and then not again until about 2 weeks ago, where she got a hold of him saying that they were looking for him. There was an objection to this. I don't know what the objection was. They went to a sidebar. It was a long sidebar. That's when, after they got done, they called a break. When we came back in, the carport items, he said, were never in the house. Marlissa Ferrer is still doing direct. He was not aware of any Frank Carson items in the house. And he said he was more along the lines getting rid of Heather's ex's property. Apparently her ex-boyfriend or whatever had left quite a bit of property there in some of the rooms, and it was starting to bother him, I guess. He said that Rhonda Erickson was never refused entry in the house. In addition, he was asked about a broken window in the back of the house, and he said that Heather did fall asleep with a cigarette on a mattress, and the mattress caught fire. He broke out the window to throw the mattress out the window to remove it from the house. He never had any other contacts with Frank CARSON before or after that one night. He said that Frank kicked the door in, and Frank CARSON never testified against him in any cases. He said he never told Heather's mom that he was getting married, and that was on 5/4 of 2004 when he said that they got married. He never spoke with Valley CARSON. He never received eviction notices the entire time he lived there. He never saw Valley CARSON take anything to the dump. The books were water damaged, had to use tools to remove off of concrete. And he said, Frank CARSON's exact words, "If I ever see you again, you will never be seen again." And he says he's still scared today of retaliation or bodily harm from Frank CARSON. He left the residence afraid that Frank CARSON would call the cops. He had no cell phone, only a house phone, which he couldn't reach there at the house. It was just in the front room. And that was the only night he ever met Frank CARSON. He never had any contact with anybody else in regards to this case. His public defender yesterday told him his charges against Heather had been dropped on the theft of the books. Percy Martinez was going to do cross. They did a little bit of sidebar. The judge didn't think he was going to get the cross today, but they did. So there's still some undecided issues with this witness. So Percy has to start kind of handicapped. He said that he moved in with Heather just a few months before they got married. The Frank CARSON incident was in July of 2004. When they paid the rent, he would drive her to an area by the courthouse, and she would go to Frank CARSON's office to pay the rent. But he could never see where she went. They never drove straight to the Frank CARSON's office. They drove in the area of the courthouse, and she parked and she walked around the corner somewhere. He said Frank CARSON did not have a room in the house, but later learned there was a small area that he was using. The books were so damaged, he had to scrape them off the cement. They were told not to sell the books, but they did anyway. He said this is on the Percy Cross, by the way, half the books were undamaged. There was probably about 200 books total, so 75 to 100 were not damaged. And he had received over $3,000 for the books. And yesterday, it was yesterday's books, were selling the books for resale, and some of them had to be repaired, like new binding put on them or something like that, but apparently they're very valuable books. He sold about 200 books. He did not use the money to pay rent, but he said he did one repair in the kitchen sink. The sink needed to be repaired, and a back window needed to be repaired. There were no... he was asked if he had a meth lab in the house, and he said they never did. but they were both using every day. So when they burned up the back room, the mattress, Percy was thinking that maybe possibly they had a meth lab back there. He denies it, and but he says Heather fell asleep with a cigarette and got the mattress on fire, and he had to break a window. He couldn't just open the window; he had to break it to get the mattress out. They were using methamphetamine every day when Frank Carson came over. He did not recall how much money he was making as a tow driver because said he was paying it throughout his wages, and he didn't need to sell or anything else. The day after the incident was a day that they sold the books, and then they bailed out with. Percy Martinez is saying they bailed out with a stolen check, and that's what they used to bail out on. Marlissa Ferrer was objecting to that point because she said there's no proof that anything was a stolen check, and she didn't know anything about it. But apparently, the defense is claiming that a check was stolen from Frank's brother, and that was what they used to bail out. Marlissa Ferreira says that they was arguing to the court, the jury's done for the day, that Leonard Hall never had any other contacts with Frank Carson before and never. And Frank Carson, and I'm looking at the wrong page because I'm repeating what I said, aren't I? So they need to get some more information on the stolen check and what the defense is saying, that he used a stolen check to bail out to pay the bail bondsman or whoever they paid. And Leonard Hall was arrested 2 times in 2005. One was a bad check, and there was another that was a drug charge, a possession charge. I believe it's a possession for sales charge, and the child abuse charge is a 273A, but that was apparently dismissed in lieu of a plea or something on one of the other charges. Judge Iniga says it wasn't on the rap sheet, but then looked at it again. Yes, it was. But some of those were dismissed, and 919 of 05, that was dismissed, and I believe it was a simple no charges filed on it. So they went from 3 felonies to a no charges filed on that case. So they need to also review the rap sheet because it seems to be a little confused about what's going on about arrests and conviction. Judge Iniga just wanted to clarify that the DA is saying the Frank Carson threats is why they fled the state. The defense is saying he fled the state because he was facing these charges. So they need to get some more information in. There was something that they were going to bring in, and it escapes me right now, in regards to some more information to them fleeing from Frank Carson or fleeing from his charges. Also, Percy Martinez says it's obvious, and in the sidebar, Marlissa Ferrer made some representations that there had been contact with Leonard Hall 2 weeks ago. And they have tried to get information in regards to Leonard Hall, and nothing's been disclosed, but she had some conversations with him, and no information's been revealed. Judge Iniga said she got the same impression, so she needs to, the DA needs to clarify whether or not they had any contact with Leonard Hall prior with Leonard Hall 2 weeks ago, and they haven't turned over any information to the defense. That's where we left it. They have some information that they're going to go on tomorrow. They're supposed to bring in for tomorrow. And the jury is coming back, I believe she said. Yeah, the jury's coming back at 10 a.m. tomorrow. The attorneys are in at 9 a.m. to discuss these things. And I also noted that the judge was going through some dates coming up. And really at this stage of the trial, they've got quite a few dates coming up of motion hearings and non-jury, either half a day or maybe even all day, I don't know. Friday, they have the pitches motion, which doesn't involve the defense in this case, but it's a DA trying to get Eddie Quintanar and Scott McFarland's personnel files for any comments or that were made, statements that were made during the internal affairs investigation. On the 7th, they're coming in at 10 a.m. On the 9th, they're finishing at noon. On the 14th, they're going to have to go over some exhibits. On the 16th, they're going over some privilege issues of some sort. I believe that's a Jack Abel privilege issues. So this thing is getting bogged down with motions and other side issues again. So that's where we're at. That's the end of the day today. The jury was not in the courtroom for very long, less than 2 hours total all day long. If remember, I have the PayPal button at the bottom of each post, and the sponsors, Doug Maynard, attorney at law of 15th and J. You have Merced Tile Supply and Merced. They both take care of your needs. Good guys, they really are, both of them. So check that out. And we'll be back in court at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and we'll see what happens with the remainder of Leonard Hall. And I believe that Percy Martinez is the only one going to be doing cross on him because it doesn't affect the other defendants. That's all I got. No other messages or anything. Nobody's come across. Nobody's come across Facebook or anything. Nothing on the website. So that's all I got. Remember what I always say. Don't take my word for it. Come to court. Find out for yourself. Good night, everybody.